Hello guys and gals and welcome back to another devlog of Landslip. It's been 2.5 months since I released devlog number 0 and it's time for another one. So at that time I thought the game would be done by now and that would have been great, but unfortunately game development is rarely fast and my perception of time is worse than Elon Musk's. So I worked my ass off, and many days and nights I spent hacking, but still, I'm not done. So what I said in the previous devlog was that I wanted to focus on graphical fidelity for the upcoming time, and so I did. So I spent some time on the water, adding reflections and some realism. So, for instance, when you look straight down, you can see through the surface. But if you look at the water from an angle, you see the reflection of the water. And if you're underwater, you have like a shorter view distance, and you also get reflections that behave similarly, but the other way around, the camera has to be moved on the opposite side of the water plane. And I tried plain flat water. That didn't look too nice, so I added some waves and ripples. Went a bit overboard, but combining the two looks pretty okay. And when I did that, after I did that, it was time for the level editor. I needed something to be able to edit the terrain. Just chuck in things in the terrain, but also I added a model or sort of module editor, so I could make reusable modules, which I can place in the world. I can rotate and place them in the world. So there are a couple of different modes, 3 actually, one for the terrain, one for the modules themselves, and a third one which is actually just placing groups of modules into the world. And they have different sub modes. There's like raycasting drawing or drawing onto a plane. And the third one, which I don't even remember anymore. Anywho, so if you place stuff in the world, you can move them up and down, rotate them, so you can save modules and levels, of course. And I forgot how to use all that stuff because it's been a couple of months since I actually built on it, so I don't remember all the hotkeys and how you work with it, but it should be pretty fast to get into again once I start delivering levels. So what else? I also added some mode where you can move around with the camera, a sort of perspective correct mode, so you get a sense of what it is that you're actually building. Like in this case, there's a small level that I'm building, and you can move around and have a look, see what it looks like approximately. So some things move around in the world and others are static, so it's sort of a partial game, but I'm not running the whole game itself, it's just some part of it. Anywho, so when you're adding stuff to the level, you need to set properties for things such as how they move, like angles and start and end points, or animation stuff, or maybe behaviors in the game, like I don't know, enemy aggression, or like a power up, how powerful it's gonna be, or stuff like that. So I added a small property editor and a select box for just adding stuff, and these are super easy to do with GUI that I talked about last devlog. Alright, so when the level editor was done enough so that I could start making levels, I went back to the game itself. I'm not sure if I ever mentioned explosions previously. These could take the game in a whole different direction. A couple of friends who tried it, and my kids said they like it a lot, and I don't know exactly what to do with it though, and I'm still making a racing game, so I'll just put it in there as a nice thing to have, but I don't think the game should revolve around that. Maybe I'll make an FPS at some other point, and then that's a different story. And I also added shadow rendering. So shadows are now visible, and I'm using shadow mapping for that. I expanded on the game menu. It's super easy to do as well with the ImGUI, and there's now a bunch of things you can set frame rate, full screen or windowed, or different colors. For testing, there's like speed or other variables for movement, things like that, which is really helps when you're testing stuff out. I also added some animations, so I currently have 3 different types of animations. They're texture animations, like offset animations, like you see in this speed ramp here, but there's also things like texture switching, where you use sort of layered switching of textures. You can swap them out and have that as an animation. And the third type is just bone or joint animation, as it's also called, where you animate stuff, and then on top of that you can have skinning, like skins. Well, I'll talk a bit more about skinning later on. Alright, and then there were like the graphics itself. When I started working on that, I had plenty of bugs. This is some problems with the shadow maps, I think. I added soft shadow edges, and here I've highlighted the edges in red. I eventually got that working, but I had a bit of a dilemma. Like with high resolution shadow maps, you get some nice things like moving objects, etc. Has these nice silhouettes that are fairly accurate. But if you look at how the shadows of this tree look, for instance, you see that the shadows are jagged and not so nice. Whereas if I lower the resolution, I get pretty nice tree shadows, but the movement on moving objects looks horrible because of the low resolution. So I really haven't figured out a good solution to this yet. I'll try to figure it out later on. Okay, then I wanted a bit of Bloom. Bloom, makes things look nice. So Bloom, state of the art some years ago, was using something called Kawaze blur filters. So I thought I'd use that. So here's how that's done. You start with some render, or any image really, and you thresh out all the dark stuff out, so you only get the bright areas, which are going to cause the bloom remaining. And then you scale that down using this Kawaze blur. So Kawaze was some Japanese guy who wrote a paper a long time ago, and you take 5 samples in the shader, which actually translates to 20 samples due to the texture filtering, linear texture filtering. And then you repeat that for a few times while you scale it down, as many times as you want, a couple of times, 3. And then you turn and you go the other way around and upsample the texture using similar sampling, but instead you're using 32 samples instead of 20. And you repeat that until you're back to the same size of texture as you started with. And then finally what you do is you take the starting image and you add this thresholded and blurred image on top of that, like additive blending, and then you're done. So it should give some bloom or highlights to the bright areas, and then that's easier said than done as well. So I bumped into a couple of bugs along the way. What else apart from bloom? I added something called HDR, or high dynamic range, and here's a photo where you can see the difference between HDR on the left and without on the right. And this is in computer graphics. It's mostly adding additional like resolution in terms of color or light, which is the same thing sort of. So instead of rendering to a normal byte buffer, you render to a floating point buffer instead, and then you get it's a higher bandwidth thing, but you instead get to overshoot. Then you can have like higher exposure and stuff like that. It looks a lot nicer. And then I at the end placed all the exposure and gamma and stuff like that in a final post-processing shader called the tone mapper, so I don't have to do that in each shader as well. So the total number of shaders I have now is something like 12 vertex shaders and as many fragment shaders approximately. So anyhow, this of course caused some bugs along the way, and here I'm overflowing some 8-bit texture thing in the post-processing steps, and here the bloom starts showing, but perhaps a bit on the heavy side. Alright, well, enough of those bugs. Next up was characters, and to my surprise I didn't find any skinning libraries that are readily available for Python. And I didn't find anything I could use straight out of the box, so I built my own. And the first part was I used the CPU to animate the vertices, and I released that on open source on GitHub. You can see find the link here if you want. Well, it's for, so any Python dude can easily do it in the future, because I didn't find any of that. And then I chucked that over on the GPU to speed it up. And that of course also caused some strange parts in other parts of the animation system, like textures on items moving all over the place, and like this rocket launcher turning flat, etc. Well, anyhow, moving the skinning over to the GPU only took a couple of days. That was a big surprise for me, because I had no really experience with using GPUs and shaders at all, so I thought it was going to be tougher to get that working, but it's pretty straightforward. A little bit of guessing, but I got it running. Alright, and without these characters, my game can run in the hundreds of FPS, but only a dozen of characters, and the game stutters along at like 60 FPS or something like that. So, and even more, gets worse, degraded. So, well, this is on my decrepit machine. With a new strong machine, we might get 5 times performances, but still, I don't want to. I want to be able to play the game on my computer, my old one, the one I'm using, and I want to be able to push 50 players or so in there without any problems. I'm not sure where I'm gonna draw the line for multiplayer, but it'd be fun to be able to play with a lot of players, I think. Anyhow, when I've done the characters and put them in there and done some animation stuff, skinning, I needed some kind of animation control that decides what animations to use when. Instance flipping between walking and running when the speed is higher, or adding jumping, etc., etc. So I also had like a small part of it where the upper body, the torso, has a different animation. For instance, when you're holding a weapon, you might animate the upper body a little bit, and maybe the lower body is sort of running or something. And I also added the rotation for the head and torso, so you're able to look at things and you can tell where someone's looking. And as you see, I had a few bugs of that as well in the beginning. Alright, well, the characters I was able to get in there at least some early version, and then my son suggested I make a moon level, and I thought, yeah, great idea, no air resistance, low gravity, different environment, yeah, it might sound fun. And after a day of trying it out, it's pretty clear that no amount of effort is going to make playing on the moon fun. It's just as boring in the game as it is in real life. There's no fun playing on a desert, grey brown desert place that's sort of totally barren, and no amount of effort is going to make it fun. So I just scrapped that idea. Alright, then after that I decided to make the characters look nice, like some nice looking characters, and try to sort of figure out, sort of prototype what kind of look am I aiming for. So I actually bought a pro account on meshy.ai. That it's an online service where you can have AI generate 3D models, and it's okay. It generates some models that look okay at a distance, but close up, a lot of them will have glitches and stuff like that. But anyway, so done. I got a model and chucked it into a game. All right. I had to do all the rigging and stuff myself eventually, because reasons they didn't have the animations I needed, and yeah, a bunch of reasons. Anyhow, this bug you see here was caused by GLTF exporter bug in Blender. There's been a lot of middleware bugs as well, but maybe I should make a horror game instead. So alright, so I started working in Blender to add some animations and fix the rigging. Modeling was almost done, but I had to do some tweaking here and there. And here's the final product. You can see how the bloom turned out. There's kind of a sun halo in the background, where the sun's at, or some bright things. I made open caves that are visible for the player. I added different types of biomes, like flat lands and this autumny biome thing, just to get some variations. That was really easy to do, just add some materials and change some in the generator. And for you, the viewer and prospect developer, what is the main question you should be asking yourself at this point? It is, of course, did he save time to build all this from scratch in Python instead of using like Unity or Unreal Engine? And the answer is, I very much doubt it. Sure, Python is super impressive. There's no chance I'd be getting this far using some language like C or Java. There's so much ready-made, and it's very, very easy to structure small pieces of code compared to just building it out myself. In the previous devlog, I thought I'd be completely finished by now. But as usual, you realize stuff along the way, and that's what I've done. So at this point, there's really only a couple of substantial things that are required to complete the game. The rest of the stuff is more content, the game itself, and those things are super duper easy to do in Python. So I think going forward, it's going to be quick. It's going to be easy to do. So what's next? And now it's time for me to get going with marketing and putting up a Steam page, etc. I'll focus on cobbling together some marketing materials like screenshots and stuff so it looks okay, logo, whatnot. And after that, it's simply making a fun game, and some polish after that. So that sounds easy, right? So when's it gonna be done then? Oh, okay, let's see. 1 month of coding the multiplayer and optimizing the animations. 1 week for building the server. I'm gonna build it in C, I guess, to be able to handle the load. 1 week of coding some simple game features like birds and planes and stuff to give life to the scene. A couple of days for adding grass, etc., to make it look a bit nicer. Then I want to refine the character animations, or maybe finding someone to do it for me for a small fee. And then a few more weeks for a couple more characters. Then a week for adding sounds, a week for adding music, a week for polishing the menus, adding a loading screen, name change, level select, character select, a lot of things like that. Then a couple of days for Steam integration, being able to find your friends, a couple of weeks for creating the terrains for the first few levels, and then another 2 weeks for specific content for levels, like all the power-ups, all the stuff that's gonna go in there. Maybe there'll be like I don't know, volcanoes or dragons or whatever that might be. And then a week of playtesting, balancing the levels and the weapons. A couple of weeks of polish on top of that, and then a couple of weeks of unknown, which is very optimistic, of course. And what does that come down to? 20 weeks? That's 5 months. That's not what I hoped for. Oh,